Today I woke up earlier than usual, and this has been happening kind of often recently, which is nice. And I've been having breakfast with my parents every morning, and it's really cute. Like, we honestly end up having like a good laugh in the morning. We talk about something related to our lives, and it's like a nice way to start the day. I always want to have a little giggle. Welcome to day 9 of Podmas, and I am so excited to be answering one of your questions today. So let me get right into it. The question is, what are your thoughts on long distance relationships, even with trust and communication? Do you think it will last? First of all, thank you for asking my opinion. Second of all, give me a little more detail, why don't you? I feel like having a bit more backstory can really help answer the question, but I'll still get into it. And third of all, if you would like to submit a TMI story, tell me something embarrassing, ask for holiday advice, or just advice on anything you're struggling with, go to the link in the show notes. You can either write a story on my website, and I have no idea who sends them. It gives me no information of your own, so it's completely anonymous. And same goes for sending in an actual voice message. You can, again, click a link. It's in the show notes, and you can record yourself asking a question. Unless I know you and know your voice, I won't know who you are, and we can play it on the show. So I freaking love when I get a new notification, a bring, in my email, and it's one of your stories or questions. It gets me so excited. So don't hesitate. This is your sign. If you've been thinking about telling me a story or asking a question, do it right now. Pause and then come back. So, there's two sides to this coin that I want to cover. When you're together and when you're apart. I have had a mid-distance relationship where my boyfriend would go to school and he was about an hour drive away from me. So I wouldn't consider that very long distance. So I called in some help and chatted with a few friends of mine who are either currently in long distance relationships or have been in very long distance relationships in the past. And I'll start with one of my friends from high school. He has been in, I think, 2 or 3 different long distance relationships. He's currently single. So that just shows that they have not lasted. And I was like, dude, someone asked this question. What advice or what feedback do you have in regards to a long distance relationship and like if it'll last? And he goes, just don't do it. We'll take that with a grain of salt. Thank you. Thank you, sir. But he's like, it really depends on the phase of life you're in. It depends on how far the distance is. He says he knows someone who they're in a great long distance relationship right now. So it really depends on you. It depends on your age, I think. Depends how long you've been together before you went long distance, because the shorter the time of you dating before you go long distance, the less of a foundation I think you'll have, the less practice you'll have at communicating. It's not to say it can't work, but it's just to say that you'll be in a different situation where you're still getting to know each other in a very early stage when you're so far apart, and that takes intentionality. And then the third thing I wanted to say in regards to just in general with long distance relationships is, what are your values? What is your love language? What are the issues in your relationship that you may already have before you even went long distance? Because long distance will amplify those issues already. And typically with couples, you fight about the same problem over and over again. It may present itself differently, but that's usually how it goes. You don't come up with brand new problems all the time. So let's get into when you are together in a long distance relationship, because I think this is a pretty critical time. We'll talk about when you're apart and how to function while you have your own lives, blah, blah, blah. But when you're together, it's your quality time as a couple, and it might happen every week. I was really grateful I got to go see my boyfriend every week, every other week, because it wasn't that far away and I had access to a car. Shout out my parents. Or it might be like every couple months you have time together. And the struggle with that is there's so much pressure on that time when you're finally together that it can make things really, really challenging. You can fight when you don't want to be fighting. And that's the hard thing, is if you're like, dude, we literally never see each other and now we're in an argument and like this whole thing is ruined and I just want to go home, but my home is far away. Like, what the fuck? It's okay, but it's important to acknowledge the pressure that is being put on your hangout, on your trip, on your visit together. And I'll give you a little backstory for me and my man, how it went down. When we first started doing the mid distance apart, I can't say long because you guys doing hours plane rides, that is long. And shout out to you, bowing down right now, bowing down to you. It's gonna be okay. So when it first happened and my boyfriend, we'd been together for maybe 4 months and then school was starting again, so he moved an hour away, and when I would visit him, I'd only visit him for a night, and it was like a whirlwind of a night. We wouldn't do anything related to our like responsibilities. We would just hang out. I would sleep over, we would get food, we would make dinner. We barely even made our own dinner, I think, actually, when I would go for just that one night. And then it slowly started turning into 2 nights. And then I slowly started getting more comfortable and I'd go there for 3 nights. And once it got to that 3, 4 night point, I realized I needed my own space at certain points. Because when I was there for 1 or 2 nights, we would spend that entire time together, all condensed, every single waking moment of the day, except when I was taking a shit or he was taking a shit. Or even when one of us was showering, sometimes the other person would be hanging out in the bathroom. His shower at his apartment was awful. Awful, 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 awful. I do not miss that shower. The water pressure was just terrible and it couldn't get very hot. Anywho, I found a solution to that, and that was taking my own space. Whether that was going on a walk by myself, or eventually I had a Good Life Fitness gym membership, and the membership I had, I could go to any location. So thank the Lord, there was a Good Life gym very close to where he lived. So eventually I started to think like, okay, I'm getting into really bad moods when I'm here for so many days in a row and I'm not having any time by myself. I think I'm going to like book workout classes and go to the gym by myself, spend a few hours in my lonesome, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna shower there. They have showers at Good Life. I'll bring my slides, I'll bring my towel, I'll bring my change of clothes, I'll bring my hairbrush and my deodorant, and I will have my own little me time. And it made the biggest difference because I would have multiple hours on my own. I'd get some physical exercise in, get my endorphins running, come back all clean. I am crazy. I need to shower multiple times a day. Like I am just such a like sensory, you know this if you've listened for a while, I have sensory issues. I need to feel clean most of the time. So not being able to have a nice like yummy shower was a problem. And the thing with spending so much condensed time together, if you aren't taking those me moments, is that you end up like talking so much. You end up telling this person every single itty bitty little thought that you are having throughout the entire day. And it gets really, really exhausting. So when I would go either on a walk or my boyfriend would go to work sometimes and I'd get to spend the day alone, I would like have all these thoughts or realizations or just like time to just be internally quiet with myself. And then when I would come back to him, I'd be like, oh my God, missed ya for those couple hours. That was so fun to have a little time apart. Let me tell you everything I realized. That's also me because I'm crazy and I have like a million epiphanies a day. But it was so good for our relationship because we also started to feel like we were functioning like we lived together. And when you would live together, you wouldn't spend every fucking waking moment together. You would need your own time. And when we had multiple days on end together, we would probably make less plans. We would have like a loose plan for a night. And if we were in the mood, then we would go out and do it. But we would go to Walmart and grocery shop together. And then he'd cook dinner for me or I would cook lunch for us. And it was really, really fun because we were intentional about how we were spending that time. We were like, okay, let's do a date night this visit. Or let's make sure that like, you know, we go hang out with your friends. And that's the hard thing too, is when you're going into someone else's space, you probably don't have friends in that community. And for me, after a while, I started to crave that. I started to crave something of my own in his space. So it was really fun when I got to know his friends better and we would hang out quite a few times when I would go, or not quite a few times when we would go. But overall, we started to feel like we also weren't just trapped, the two of us, only talking and only hanging out with each other for that whole time, because that's really intense. That's a lot. I also just touched on this, but I want to emphasize don't overplan your visit because you could want to like do everything under the sun and introduce them to everyone you've ever met and like bring them everywhere with you. But they might show up and be exhausted. After my drive to go see him, I was like, I need to chill. I need to have a shower. I need to have a snack. I want to just cuddle with you. And then do some other stuff to get comfy together, and then by the time a couple hours have gone by, you're more settled, and you shouldn't jam pack a million things into a visit, because yes, that might feel like it's going to be quality time, but I think visits are just so much more fun when you go with the flow of things. While we're on the topic of while you're together, there's a few other things that made my freaking day and made my visits to see my boyfriend 10 times better. And that was starting to feel like part of his actual physical room was my own. So after a while, I got really, really, really tired of having a bag open and just sprawled out the whole time, and he would get frustrated because my shit would be everywhere, and like I would get annoyed because I was living out of a bag. So it took us a while, but finally it was like, okay, wait, he doesn't keep a lot of stuff in this bottom drawer of his dresser. He could clear that out each time I come, and then that could be my drawer. So then I could actually unpack my clothes and put all my stuff away. And that was the first thing that I started to do when I showed up, is I would unpack everything and then be like, oh my gosh, okay, I feel settled. I feel like I can function now in this space. And then it was so friggin' cute because I used to pack literally everything under the sun to go visit him, because I needed a towel, I needed my pillow, I needed clothes, I needed sweatpants, I needed my toothbrush. I needed the essentials, but then times a million. And after a while, I was like, hey, I don't want to load all this shit up into my car, but he would never have a clean towel. And I was like, listen, love you. I need a fucking clean towel to shower with. And the communication, God bless. And his willingness to take my critiques, my criticisms, my requests, incredible. So every single time I would come near the end of us doing this mid-distance relationship, he would have the bottom drawer of his dresser cleared out for me to put my stuff in. He'd have a clean towel folded, and he would put a cute little note on it. And it made my day. It like made me feel so welcomed into this space, so ready to get settled. And I hope me like just sharing all of this is giving you an idea of how can I make this long distance time together, this long distance relationship when we have time together, if that makes sense, more fun, more genuine, more intentional. And one thing I started to do, or I think I only did this once, but while he wasn't in his bedroom, I like wrote a bunch of cute notes and then put them different places in his room that I know would take him a while to find it. So then it was cute because over the coming weeks, it was like, you're my best friend. I love you. I miss you. And then it's like, oh, like he felt cared for. He felt like I really put in the time to show him that I loved him. And that just like also for him doing the drawer thing and the note, it started off our visit on just such a good foot. And you want that. You want to show up and be like, oh, I can breathe again because I'm with you and I get to enjoy this time together. Now, let's get into when you're apart. Because this is arguably the hardest time, being apart. Because also, who knows? Maybe you're apart for a really friggin' long period of time and it's going to be okay. The first thing I want to say is that it's such a classic thing to say, I feel like, but I kind of believe it, is that if you're doing really, really long distance, I think it's important to have an end point where you're either gonna come back together and live together, or the person who's one place is going to move to where you live, or if there's like a certain time limit on how long you're doing long distance, like someone's going to do exchange for 3 months or going to do a work study for a couple months somewhere else, or you're going to spend a summer somewhere. That's better, I think, because you know when it's going to end and you know when you're going to reunite. But my boyfriend and I have talked about the fact that like we've been together for a while now, and if one of us was to move somewhere for a job, I would kind of need to know that either, like, let's say he was moving somewhere for a job, I would then consider and think about and research what it would be like for me to move there, and vice versa. Because the end game, the end goal of the game is to eventually live together when we feel ready. So if he moved somewhere else and we weren't even talking about it, planning for it, thinking maybe this will happen in the next year, I would just feel like, why am I doing this? This sucks. So that's one element. is having an endpoint, I think, is really important. Another element is this person specifically asked the question saying, do you think it will last even with trust and communication? So, when I was chatting with my friend from high school who has a lot of experience in long distance relationships, he said, having trust and communication is one thing, but there are some things that that just won't change. And one of them is he loves to be very present where his feet are in the moment. And when he's in a long distance relationship, he feels like he's 1 foot out the door because you're on your phone all the time, or you're texting them, or you're calling them, or you're just thinking about them and missing them. And he's like, I never felt jealous in the way of, oh, she's going to hook up with someone else. But he felt jealous of the people she was with because they got to be physically with her and he didn't. And that's hard. And that's something you can't really change it's going to be hard because there are all of these. Oh my God, my head is spinning with so many ideas. I just have so many thoughts to say about this. Something that I've experienced though, in terms of struggling to be present because your foot is always out the door, wanting to talk to them, wanting to be with them, is being intentional about what you text or how much you text and when you call. So something my boyfriend and I also went through was, we're not big texters, and I'm very grateful for that. And I think it's really important to have this open line of communication that if I'm not texting you, it doesn't mean I don't miss you. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I'm not thinking about you. It just means that I am being present in my life where I am in those moments, and that's important. So getting that out of the way, you don't want to be on your phone all the time. I don't think a long distance relationship is sustainable if you have to text throughout your whole day because you're really not going to be present then. But then when it comes to phone calls, every single time my boyfriend and I would transition from being long distance to 15 minutes away, so no distance at all, we would struggle with phone calls because usually, and I moved out over the course of our relationship too and then moved back. So there was really transitions between how often we call each other and why we're calling each other. Because sometimes we would call each other more one person than the other, depending on the season of life. Let's say it's me. I would call him just to call him. I didn't have anything really to say, and it was like a way to fill time between transitional periods, which is just not good because you're interrupting the other person's day, you're not having a quality conversation, you're not really connecting, and then you just end up leaving the phone call annoyed with them. It happened all the time. I'm walking to the bus stop and I just call him just to call him, or he's walking home from class and he just calls me just to call me. And eventually we would catch it and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. First of all, you're calling me a million times a day for no reason. I'd rather you save all those calls and let's have one big catch up that's actually we're focused and we're not distracted and we're going to sit down or lay in our beds and actually talk about everything. And then you'll leave that call feeling way more fulfilled. And then secondly, I started to learn that if I don't feel like answering your call, I'm not going to, whether it's because I'm busy or I'm just simply not in the mood to chat or it's going to interrupt my day. It's okay to not answer the phone call. And he validated that for me. And he's like, oh my God, don't answer the call if you don't want to. So then suddenly we became more comfortable literally hanging up the call. And it's so funny because it's something that I think is seen as rude is if your phone's ringing and then you just immediately decline it. But that was actually kind of a signal for us of I'm busy and I will call you later. And that made me be able to be like, oh, okay, great. I wanted to chat with him. He's not free right now. I know he'll call me later. And that's where the trust and communication comes in because we talked about all of that and I trusted him that he wasn't just ignoring me because he hates me. And it was the absolute worst if I did answer his call, but I was in a bad mood and I knew I didn't feel like chatting because then we would have a horrible conversation. And then you have to derail the whole thing and backtrack and then try and freaking come back together and have a good quality convo. So be aware of those transition periods and communicate these things. Don't be afraid to be like, hey, bitch, you're pissing me off right now, and this is why, and this is how I think we can solve it, because that changes the frickin' game. 2 more things before I wrap this up. One of them is a little story about my bro. I will keep most of his relationship, his story about this on the wraps because I want him to come on and share it one day, but there is something to take away from his experience. So he met his ex-girlfriend on Hinge, and their entire relationship was long distance. They lived about a 3-hour drive apart from each other. And what was really interesting was that they never really got comfortable functioning day to day together because they only hung out in very short, like 3 or 4 day sequences or only weekend in days in a row. And that made it so whenever they would get together, they would do a million things. They'd party hard, they'd go see everyone, they'd get super hungover, and then they'd say bye. And so then they wouldn't see each other for a week, 2, 3 weeks. And so you got really comfortable just functioning on your own, hanging out with this person really intensely, and then having your own time. And the thing that's hard about that is that it's hard to really get to know that person in the way that they function on a day-to-day basis because you're not seeing them. You're not experiencing going on short little dates with them. And I think that's a really important part of a relationship is getting to go on a quality time date and then say goodbye because then you can catch up, you can have fun together, you can talk about life, you can do something fun, and then you get to go be in your own space. But the way that their relationship operated was just really, really intense and then completely apart. And it was a bit of a roller coaster because of that. And so I think it's important to have a foundation of being together for a little bit b- in short distance before you go long distance. And the thing that I saw with my brother is that it was really hard to actually understand his complete honest feelings towards her because he would have moments where he would doubt the relationship, but then he would hang out with her and they'd have a great time and they'd spend 3 days together and it would be like so much fun, and then they'd go their separate ways. But then he would struggle during those times apart, and it's hard to have a real understanding of this person from a full, well-rounded view because you don't see them all the time and you don't see them Monday to Friday, for example. So that was such an interesting way to see a relationship function being long distance for the entire time. Now my brother is traveling and him and his girlfriend broke up, and he will tell that story on the pod, I think, slash hope, because it's a wild one. And he is now in this life stage where everyone he meets is single. So I want to wrap up this conversation by saying it all depends on the stage of life you're in and the values you have and the goals you have of what you want to achieve in your life and whether or not you think you can be in a long distance relationship for that. Because some people feel like there are some things they want to do in life and they have to be single for it. My brother was hoping he could go traveling and be in his relationship, but turns out he was meant to do it alone, meant to do it single, and he's having the time of his life. If you're someone who's hoping to settle down soon, it's important to make sure that the person you are dating is on a similar plane, wavelength, that they're going in a similar direction as you so that, you're not wasting each other's time, really. But I think you need to be honest with yourself and those around you what your real goal is with your relationship or slash your life and where it's going. So that is to say, I think a long distance relationship can last, and I think it really depends on the person and the relationship and the situation. What I love to remember and think about is that if there are thoughts of breakups swirling in your head, know that, at least I believe this, if you were to break up with this person and you are meant to be with them, the universe will bring them back into your life, or God, whatever you believe in, will bring that person back into your life. If, like, I've thought this about exes, I'm like, I'm struggling to figure out if breaking up with them is the right decision or not. And then I would say to myself, like, Jess, this person will come back into your life or you will go back into theirs if this person's meant to be like your person. And they have not come back into my life, and I know now that they are not my person. But it's just something to remember and sit with if this is something you're really struggling with. Know that it's not forever. Know that you have full autonomy over whether or not you stay in a long distance relationship. And also, I think there are a lot of creative ways to change around the situation. I didn't even talk about this, but let's get into it for a quick sec. Being intentional about dates when you're far apart from each other is also very important. Like playing a different question game over FaceTime, or having some FaceTime sex, or eating dinner together over the phone and dressing up and looking cute. I got that one from a friend in a long distance relationship. Thank you for that advice. And making sure that like you are finding fun creative ways to spend time, have quality time and get to know each other still cuz you're always getting to know your partner while you're having time apart. It might get really mundane and tiring to constantly just hear about someone's day cuz you're not a part of their day. And that is really sad and can be a downer. So if you can get into some really interesting topics or talk about the things that someone's really struggling with or their dreams for their future life or how they're feeling about climate change. I don't know. Get into some funny, weird, crazy, interesting, important topics. And that way you can feel like you're connecting on a deeper level and you don't necessarily need to be physically together to do that. However, being physically together can just, a hug can just save the day. So, know that it's okay to crave that, and it's okay to leave a relationship if you can't have that. I love you. Happy day 9 of Podmas. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. And please send me more questions. Send me some TMI stories. I would love to share them on the pod. I'll see you soon.